This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Heading on down to Pimlico Race Course for this week. It is the Preakness Stakes coming up on Saturday. Got a pretty fun field, despite the fact there is no sovereignty for this week. Still a lot of fun horses to dig into for this Saturday's Preakness. We're going to bring on Christina Blacker of FanDuel TV, getting her read on this year's field and which horses she thinks are the best bets for the 2025 Preakness Stakes. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here as mentioned by Christina Blacker. You can find her on X at Christina FDTV. She is a host, analyst, and reporter for FanDuel TV. She, of course, previewed the Kentucky Derby for us as well. Christina, happy Preakness week to you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Happy Preakness week. Great to be back with you and on the heels of a really fun Kentucky Derby, 151st Derby about a week and a half ago. And the weather was tricky. We had a lot of rain on and off through the week. We actually had a severe storm warning on Kentucky Oaks Day where we took about a 90-minute break in the action. But irregardless of the circumstances, the Derby is the Derby, and just being there and seeing it, it is so incredible. It's one of those bucket list items. Everybody has to add it to their list because it is unlike anything else I have experienced in sports. And I've heard that from so many other folks who've been lucky enough to go to the Super Bowl, to go to the World Series, things along those lines. It's just one of those events that you have to experience.
Well, I'm hoping it's a good event for you, but also a profitable event for you, because when you came on for the Derby, you said, hey, journalism's fine as a favorite. I think that sovereignty's odds will lengthen throughout the week and we can get a better number on Saturday. Not only did you nail the analysis of that actually happening, but also sovereignty went out there and won the dang thing too. So no sovereignty here, which is a bit sad because we don't get the shot at a Triple Crown, but it's got to make you feel pretty good about your read on these horses heading into this week.
Yeah, I think one of the points that we talked about a couple weeks ago was that the California form and the Florida form looked really strong to me coming into this year's Derby. And that's exactly what we saw. Sovereignty, your Kentucky Derby winner, he was the winner of the Florida Derby. And then Journalism, who was the post-time favorite, he finished second in the Kentucky Derby, but also the third place finisher, Baeza, who drew into the race. He was a Santa Anita, California-based horse as well. So that California and that Florida form really showed up in Kentucky this year. Excited to see, of course, Journalism coming back in the Preakness. Disappointed that we're not going to have Sovereignty there. But if you know Bill Mott, the trainer of Sovereignty, he's considered a little more of a conservative guy in general. He really takes his time with his horses. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's been training for over 45 years, and he doesn't actually go to the Derby very often because he doesn't really push them through to be kind of precocious. He actually said going into the Derby, this is the shortest price horse I've ever had in the Derby, and this is probably the biggest chance I've ever had. And he said it from such a place of calm and confidence. It was interesting to hear that wisdom and then to see the horse run as well as he did. So disappointed not to have him there, but I'm not surprised. And I do think that they're going to let him rest up and he'll come back with a really strong race in the Belmont. So who knows, depending on what happens in the Preakness, if Journalism were to win, maybe we get that rubber match between the two of them in the Belmont in a couple weeks.
And Journalism is a big favorite to do so for this week. So we're going to dive in, try to get Christina's read on this year's Preakness Stakes, letting you know which horses she is eyeing for Saturday. And let's talk about other races throughout this week at Pimlico to see which horses Christina likes there as well. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. We already broke down this week's PGA Championship with Brandon Gadula of FanDuel Research getting his best bets. For that, we have agreement on a bet or a golfer we like for that one. Check out our favorite outrights, non-outrights, and more for Quail Hollow up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed and over on the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page. Well, of course, all of our PGA shows on that FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page. And of course, next week, got the Monaco Grand Prix, Indy 500, different kind of racing, and the Coca-Cola 600 on the show next week. Covering the Spread with Dr. Nick Giffen coming your way next Thursday. Again, Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe, and if you like what you hear, there's a 5-star rating and review as well. Big swings, bigger payouts. FanDuel is the clubhouse leader for betting major golf because right now all customers can get a profit boost for every round of the second major. Boost your winnings on anything from outright winners to round leaders to tourney matchups and so much more. FanDuel is your go-to for betting on the championship tee-off with a variety of bet types and live bet as the tournament drama unfolds. So don't wait. Visit FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and swing for some green. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Chat Connecticut. Visit M&T Gambling Help in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit Gambling Helpline MA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Christina, for this year's Preakness Stakes, as always, they're down at Pimlico Race Course, and a key always is knowing what the course race is like. So what are the key things to know, key differences between Pimlico and Churchill Downs that people should know about for this week?
One thing to keep in mind is that the Kentucky Derby distance is 1.25 miles, and that is the first time that most of these horses are going to try the 1.25 miles distance. And it's a huge topic of conversation going into the race. Can all the runners actually excel at a distance like that? We do cut back just slightly in distance in the Preakness. It's 1.316 miles. There's also a shorter stretch run at Pimlico, so you don't have that long, I think it's 1,234 feet at Churchill Downs to run all the way down the length of the stretch before you hit the wire. So for the closers, for the horses that are kind of mid-pack, you have a little bit of extra real estate in the stretch at Churchill Downs than you do at Pimlico. So a little bit of a tighter course, a little bit of a shorter stretch, slightly shorter distance. Over the last couple of years, and really I would say into the last decade, you do see horses that are in that first pack a little bit more successful, whether they're on the lead, whether they're stalking the pace, or whether they're sitting midway through the pace scenario. Horses that are coming from way out of the back, those deep closers, they have a little bit of a harder time at Pimlico and in the Preakness than they would in the Kentucky Derby if you get that hot pace up front that really sets it up for a horse from off of it.
And we're going to talk about that potential race shape in just 1 second. But first, let's break down the post draw, which took place on Monday of this week. Obviously, fewer horses here, so the post draw may not matter quite as much relative to the Kentucky Derby, but did any horses get a favorable or unfavorable draw for you based on what you saw there?
I think it's really key what you mentioned in that, there's fewer horses running, right? We had 20 entered in the Kentucky Derby. We ended up with 19 competing, but we have just 9 competing in the Preakness. So it's not going to be as much of a concern where you're drawn. I do think that as far as the post position goes, goal-oriented, the horse along the inside, he's somewhat committed in terms of his strategy because of the inside post. He's a horse that actually debuted here at Santa Anita back on April the 6th. And if you go back and watch that race, you'll notice he does something that we call climbing. So as he came out of the starting gate, he didn't make the early lead. And when horses are shuffled back, you get a lot of kickback from the runners in front of them, meaning the dirt that's kind of flying up from the heels of the horses in front is coming at them, whether it hits them in the chest, kind of flies past their face. It's not painful, but it is a little bit of something you have to be willing to run through. It's a little bit of an obstacle, if you will. Goal-oriented was shuffled back in the pace in his debut, and he started climbing, and he's throwing his legs up really high, threw his head up in the air. He didn't care for it at all. So you'll notice in his second race, they put him right on the lead. And we have a kind of a little cliche, clean faces win races. So he never had any kickback. He was able to go gate to wire, and he was clearly more comfortable, and he was effective in that position. So from the inside post, with the little idiosyncrasies that goal-oriented has showed us, he's going to be gunning for the lead. He's really going to have to commit to that position. American Promise, the 3 horse, is another runner that I think runs well when he's forwardly placed. So I think you're going to see him involved early. The only other horse I would kind of talk about as far as that post position goes is Clever. Again, the 8. He was incredible on the lead in his last race at Oaklawn. He's never faced horses of this caliber before, but the fact that he's drawn to the outside of the speed is a good thing because he can come away from the starting gate and he doesn't really have to use that early speed that he has at his disposal. He can kind of watch and see what everybody else does. And if he wants to sit a little bit wide, just off the pace, he can relax in that circumstance, or they can go ahead and try to change his style a little bit, drop him back and see if he's willing to rate. So I think he was a slight winner in terms of the post draw, but I don't think that there were any major losers. And part of that is just dictated by the smaller field.
Now, you mentioned that goal-oriented in the one may want to get out there and get to an early lead. And we saw a lot of horses that were similar to that for the Derby. And that was a big talking point leading into the Derby, how it's going to be this kind of blistering pace. When you look at the field for the Preakness, what kind of race shape are you expecting this time around?
I think you're going to see a pretty fair pace scenario. Honestly, I think we have a group of horses that want to be on or near the lead. I think we have a pretty clear group of horses that want to sit in the middle of the field. And then we have a couple of deep closers. I would say Sandman, the 7, is probably our true kind of drop back, make that one run type of horse. But just the runners that we talked about a second ago, goal oriented, the 1, the 3, American Promise, the 5, Pay Billy, and then the 8, Clever. Again, those are the horses that I see in that first flight. I think goal-oriented is probably going to be on the lead. American Promise sitting just off of him. And then with the 8, Clever, again, whether they decide to go 3 wide or they want to maybe tuck into 4th, I think that position is going to be really readily available to them. Journalism, part of what makes him so sort of formidable as an opponent is the fact that he can sit a little closer to the pace if he needs to. He has a high cruising speed, but he doesn't need the lead. So I think he sits right in the middle of this field, maybe sitting 4th, maybe sitting 5th in that position. Not really sure what Heart of Honor will do. Heart of Honor is a horse that is shipping in from Dubai. He's actually your 2nd place finisher in the UAE Derby back on April the 5th. So he has an experienced, fast, early American style racing. He might end up a little further back than he's used to. River Thames, the 6 horse, probably mid-pack with Journalism. He's one of those. And then again, Sandman will be your deep closer. I think it's really fair. It's a fair pace that we're expecting. I don't think that the speed or the pace is really going to flatter or hurt any particular runner in the field.
You mentioned Journalism and the versatility that horse has. And Journalism Course with No Sovereignty is the big favorite for Saturday's race, 8-5 on the morning line. So we talked about Journalism entering the Derby, and you were pretty impressed by him overall. Obviously, ran well there, finished 2nd behind Sovereignty. What's your view of Journalism now that you have more data and now in a different field here for the Preakness?
You know, I like Journalism even more coming away from the Kentucky Derby, even though he finished 2nd. I think if you have the time to go back and watch the replay from the Kentucky Derby and just dedicate yourself to only watching Journalism in the race and then watch it again and only watch Sovereignty, because not that Journalism had a bad trip, but he didn't have a good trip, if that makes sense. He came away from the starting gate and there were some horses to his inside that kind of veered out a little bit as they were looking for their position. And he got bumped around a little bit. Nothing that was unfair, just something that happens in a 20-horse field. From that bumping, he sort of ended up shuffled back, I think a little further than they would have wanted him to be in terms of that pace scenario. And you watch his jockey, Umberto Rispoli, he's busy the whole time. He's riding, he's looking left, he's looking right, he's trying to find position, sending him to, one spot to hold his position and then taking back and then sending again. He kept having to make all of these little maneuvers, and they were all the right maneuvers. But with a racehorse, ideally, you want to settle, you want to hit a good rhythm, you want them to be able to get a lot of air as they're breathing and as they're running down the backstretch. And then you want to ask them for one run as you turn for home. You watch the trip that Sovereignty had, and that's the trip he had. Junior Alvarado just sat, settled, relaxed. And that horse took some big, long galloping strides. He was a little further back off the pace. But if you watch the two of them, when Rispoli made his move on Journalism, Alvarado said, let's go too. And he followed him. And if you look in the late stages of that race where Sovereignty overtook Journalism, I think a big part of it was the fact that he just had a little bit more left in reserve because he wasn't used in that first quarter mile to try to establish his early position. I think it's fair to say if you run the race a few more times, maybe you flip positions with these two horses. They're both that good, and they looked that good on paper coming into the race. So I take nothing away from journalism with his second place effort in the Kentucky Derby. The only question mark you have now is, can he come back and do it again in 2 weeks? These are the rigors of the Triple Crown. Whether you were the winner in the Derby, you still have the effects of running in that race. Can he come back and run his A race within 2 weeks, take on some fresh challengers? On paper, he's definitely the best horse in the field, but do we get his best effort on Saturday? That's the big question.
And the tough part about that is you are kind of requiring the best effort when the morning line odds are 8-5. Now, obviously, there are some horses that could generate some public interest for this race. But if, let's say, that number stays relatively similar to where it's at right now, is 8-5 fair to you, Christina? Or where would you need that to be in order to be like, okay, now I can feel that journalism is of value?
Yeah, if it stays at 8-5, I think it is fair, but I think it's going to come down, truthfully. I think he's going to end up closer to 4-5, maybe at post time.
Wow.
I think he's a really heavy favorite in this race. You will see money for Sandman again, just as we did in the Derby. We talked about Griffin Johnson, the TikTok star who's part owner of this horse. The Metallica fans are betting Sandman too. I mean, there's no reason on paper why Sandman should have been a lower price than Sovereignty going into the Kentucky Derby outside of the fans love this horse. He's also gray. He's really flashy. He's kind of easy to pick out. So I think the price will come down on Sandman. I think the price is going to come down on journalism. And for that reason, you have to try and pair him up with another runner in here, similar to the strategy that we were going into the Derby with the Exacta. If you think someone can beat him, then put that horse on top and play the Exacta that way. If you don't, then who's that next best scenario in terms of price and ability for a horse that can finish second and help that price kind of turn that 4-5 into maybe a 2-1 if you can get it.
So we see this field right now, and as you said, there are some horses who may get some public money, some public interest there, which could make their numbers a bit lower than potentially they should be. Which horses to you are the best ones to give journalism run for his money and potentially be in consideration for those exactas you were discussing?
I truthfully think there's only one horse that can beat journalism. From what I've seen and the races I've watched and the replays and the speed figures, the 8-horse Clever again is the only option for me. And I will play him in the Exacta that way. I'll play him first and put journalism in second, just because that's where your value is going to come in. Clever again is trained by Steve Asmussen. He has won more races in the history of thoroughbred racing in the United States than any other trainer. He's won over 10,000 races. He has not won the Kentucky Derby. He has won the Preakness in the past. And this particular horse, he's 2 for 3 lifetime. He debuted going 4.5 furlongs, which is one of those races for 2-year-olds that we run very, very early in April of their 2-year-old seasons. And with his pedigree, he had no business being good at 4.5 furlongs. He should have been one of those that you were waiting for into the 3-year-old season until we get to these 1.25-mile type distances. And he finished second that day, beating a nose. It was a head-bobbing finish. He really showed his class in that performance. He since came back. He won a race in February at Oaklawn in Arkansas. And then he won a race called the Hot Springs on March 30th, also in Arkansas. It was a gate-to-wire performance. He earned a 101 Beyer speed figure, which is very fast, especially for such a lightly raced horse. And he did it so easily. He had his ears pricked coming across the wire. I mean, it was kind of one of those freaky good performances. We actually had one of our analysts, Matt Bernier, was on the air that day, and he called it when they crossed the wire. He said, "That's your Preakness winner." Because this horse is fresh. And now he's coming in to take on a horse like journalism, who on paper is the better horse. But Clever again is kind of ascending so quickly that you have to believe that he has more to give come Saturday. And the fact that he's had more time to prepare, and maybe journalism doesn't run his A race coming back in 2 weeks, that's the opportunity. I think that if they wanted to be, we talked about the pace. He's well drawn. He can sit and stalk. But if Jose Ortiz wants to just take it to him and go to the lead, that's how he won the race in Hot Springs. So that's also an alternative. he's not really that style of rider. And with the kind of factor of Bob Baffert's horse goal-oriented from the inside and the fact that he's committed, I still think they're going to stalk. But he also is quick enough to maybe sit in front of journalism if he wants to and get the jump on him. So to me, he's the only option. I think goal-oriented is too inexperienced, the one. I think he's a good horse, but he's too green still. American Promise, I just don't think he's good enough. He wasn't really good enough in the Derby and the races that he won this year. They were against much softer company. Heart of Honor ran second to Admire Daytona in Dubai. Admire Daytona was last in the Kentucky Derby, so I don't know what that does for his chances. Pay Billy has never run against horses this good. River Thames doesn't want to go this far, in my opinion. Sandman's going to be too far back off the pace. And Gosker hasn't run against these types and doesn't seem fast enough on paper anyways. So I think Clever Again's the only option if you're going to try to beat journalism, or if you're going to look for that horse that runs second and help out your price.
So we're all in on Clever Again as far as being that other horse in this field. And it sounds like in your eyes, journalism and Clever Again are the classes of this field. So if I give you one bet, Christina, for this race, are you betting Clever Again to win? Again, the morning line odds there 5-1. Are you betting a Clever Again journalism exacta? How are you playing things if I give you just one bet for the Preakness Stakes?
So with my heart, I want journalism to win. So like with my wallet, I'm going to bet the exacta Clever Again over journalism, because I think that's your opportunity to make money in here. And again, as I said, I think he's the only horse that's capable of beating journalism. But I want to see this class, because I think this is a really strong class of 3-year-olds. I want to see this class keep showing up. I want to see journalism show up and win the Preakness. I want to see him take on Sovereignty in the Belmont with whoever else wants to show up and be, fresh to take those two on, because I think we're looking at a couple of really special horses that you're going to see them through this Triple Crown, but you're going to see them this summer at Saratoga in the Midsummer Derby. That's a race called the Travers. You'll see them by the end of the year in the Breeders' Cup taking on older horses, the Breeders' Cup Classic. We have a good class of horses from last year that are 4 years old now that have all come back to compete this year, which isn't always the case. Oftentimes these horses go off to be stallions and we don't get to kind of create that fandom. But for the fans and for the strength of this class, I want to see journalism win. But I'll bet Clever Again over him.
Okay, so the heart is rooting for journalism. We want that fun head-to-head at the Belmont, and then the wallet rooting for Clever Again, the 8-horse 5-1 on the morning line odds there for the Preakness Stakes. A lot of other races coming up this weekend, though, Christina. Of course, we've got stuff on track, I think even tomorrow, Thursday, then Friday and Saturday as well. So when you look at the races you've handicapped there, any other horses have your eye for this weekend?
Yeah, so we're already on site with the crew from FanDuel TV. We actually had Scott Hazelton and Joaquin Jaime this morning on Wednesday at the barns doing interviews. We have 8 races on the Thursday card from Pimlico, 14 on the Friday card. They're warming up with 14, and then another, I think, 14 on Preakness Day. So on Preakness Day on Saturday, I like a horse in race number 8. It's the 4-horse in their Normandy Coast. Normandy Coast runs for Eddie Keneally. He's a son of Omaha Beach. I've followed this horse for the last couple of months. I was so impressed by his last victory, and he's entered and scratched a few times. I'm not sure why he hasn't actually run in some of those races. So if Normandy Coast shows up, he's going to be a horse that I'm focusing on quite a bit. Also in that race, the 8-horse 1-900. His last race was a 7-length victory for Tom Morley. Tom Morley is a younger trainer. He's from England. He trains in New York year-round, but does a beautiful job and has had a lot of success. I think 1-900 is a horse that you definitely have to pay attention to. And then there's a couple other races. So the 10th race on Saturday is the Sir Barton. I like Invictus in there. Invictus is a son of Serengeti Empress. She was a Kentucky Oaks winner all class, and she looks like she's really passed that on to her son here. He's a son of Serengeti Empress and Into Mischief. Very, very impressive in his last race. He runs second off the break for Brad Cox and some strong ownership group. So I'll look for Invictus in that race. And then the dinner party is race number 12 at Pimlico on Preakness Day. We are expecting a lot of rain through the week. So in terms of the turf course, I think you're going to end up with a turf course that has a little give in it. It could be a good listed course. It could be a yielding course. There is a horse that actually won the race last year named Balnikov in that field, and it was a soft turf course last year too. So he can handle the conditions out there. The horse I really like, though, is Crystal Quest. Crystal Quest is a son of Uncle Mo. I loved his last race at Tampa, and it was his first race as a 4-year-old. 4-year-old horses is the kind of time point where you start to see them really physically grow and mature. And so you get some dramatic improvement in their ability at 4 years old. And I think we're seeing that with Crystal Quest, and you'll get a good price on him. Interesting kind of stat I actually found in regard to that race, and just any turf race at Pimlico, post position 9 and beyond. So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, just won for their last 41 in terms of winners. It's hard to win from the outside post at Pimlico. And the favorite in that race is in post 13. He's a very good horse named Tricari, but I can't ignore a stat like that. I needed to find a horse that was a little bit better posted. And I think Crystal Quest is that horse. So those are the ones for me so far. There's still a lot more to kind of dig through, but Crystal Quest in the dinner party, in the sprint race, we mentioned 1-900 and Normandy Coast. And then what was the other one?
Invictus in race 10.
Yeah, Invictus and the Sir Barton.
I love it. And if you want more thoughts on the Preakness, again, check out FanDuel TV throughout this entire week to get the insights of Christina and the rest of the awesome crew over there. That is all that we have here for today, breaking down the Preakness. But Christina, appreciate it as always. Fun to have you on board. I'm glad you get to rest up a little bit post Kentucky Derby. But hey, the Belmont will be here before you know it. So it's going to be a fun run once again. Good luck to you. Hope things go as well this time around as they did at the Derby. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. I appreciate it. Good to be with you.
You can find Christina on X at ChristinaFDTV. And again, check out FanDuel TV for all the awesome insights throughout this week. I am on X and Blue Sky at Jim Sonis. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Don't forget, check out our PGA Championship preview with Brandon Gadula at Quail Hollow, already up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. Big thank you to our YouTube producers, Carolyn Brock and Justin Lane, for their work on the video side of things. Thank you, Carolyn and Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Enjoy the Preakness Stakes. Hopefully it's a fun race for us, and hopefully we get that battle between journalism and sovereignty at the Belmont just around the corner. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.